Our first panel today is really super interesting. Our conversation this morning is called The Man Who Saved Twinkies. So we're introducing Dean Metropoulos, who is a double Babson MBA. He's not only an undergrad Babson MBA, but he did his, an alumnus, but he's a MBA alumnus as well. Last night, we honored Dean at the Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs. We heard a lot about his journey and about the fun that he's had flipping companies. We're really looking forward to having that conversation with you guys here today. He's a fascinating guy. It's a fascinating story. He covered last night the impact that he's made in both a personal sense and through philanthropy, and we hope to get more of that today. Dean will be interviewed by the chair of the Board of Trustees, Marla Capozzi. Marla is a leader and dean of the McKinsey Academy and the McKinsey & Company's new global ventures for client leadership development and capability building based in the Boston office. She's an expert in leadership and business innovation. Please welcome Marla and Dean.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gee, I'm glad it's here. I gotta get the morning started right.
Is this how we're kicking off our day?
Yes.
Fantastic.
With a big smile.
I don't think I've ever done this before. I have to be honest. So thank you. Thank you all for joining us, Dean. And first of all, congratulations again on your induction into the Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs. We could not be happier, especially as a Babson alum, to have you back and to have you back here on campus. The title of this is The Man Who Saved the Twinkies, right? And we are here having a fireside chat, which I'm going to rename a Twinkie side chat, is what we're having this morning. So I have a bunch of topics, and for those of you who heard Dean's speech last night, you can only imagine how many things he has to talk about. We could be here until noontime. But I'd like to actually just start with the Twinkie so we can set some context for everyone here. Just by way of a quick background on the Twinkie, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with it, was born in 1920. It originally had banana filling until they were rationed and it had to switch to vanilla. Went bankrupt in 2012. After purchasing Hostess, you put Twinkies back on the shelves in 3 months, created 1,000 new jobs, extended its shelf life, and completely transformed the business. 3 years later, it's a $3 billion business. And people repeatedly walk up to you randomly and thank you for saving the Twinkie. Probably even people who don't eat the Twinkie. So the first question to talk a bit about is, what did you see in the Twinkie? Why did you think this was worth saving?
It tasted good. You know, the man who saved the Twinkie. I've lost my personality somewhere along the way. It's all about the Twinkie. But my journey with the Twinkie actually goes back to 1996, 1997. It was at that time something called Continental Baking, which was owned by Ralston Purina, another name you all don't know. Ralston Purina ultimately was sold, and Continental Baking was sold. And we had made a deal with that company in 1996 to buy the Twinkie and Wonder Bread and some of those brands for $2.6 billion. And I said, we did a lot of due diligence, cost us about $750,000 to get quality of earnings and all of these things. And I said to the CEO, I cannot move forward until we talk with the unions. And there were 2 unions. One that ran the manufacturing and the plants, and another one that ran the routes, because it used to be delivered up and down the street daily. And the CEO said to me, he's now the chairman of Post, which is another company. He says, no way you're going to talk to the union unless we have a deal. So we got to a deal, and he let me talk to the unions. And at that time, the company had 53 factories. And they were operating at around 44, 45% of capacity. So I sat down with the unions, and I said, listen, in order for us to move forward, we have to understand that we've got a structure. We can't have more than half of our plants running empty. The cost structure is killing it, and so forth. And they were fairly receptive. I said, we want to invest in technology, efficiency. They were fairly receptive. Then I met with the Teamsters Union, and they were the drivers up and down the routes. They had 22,000 routes. And we said, listen, the routes are running at around 38, 39% capacity. I said, we can't run 60% empty trucks. And they said, well, what do you have in mind? I said, well, you tell me if there's a better solution, but we got to rationalize, consolidate. They were very unreceptive to the concept, and I knew we would have a very difficult time transforming that. So we moved on from that acquisition. Many years later, it went to another company called Interstate Baking, and then a private equity group from New York bought them out of Chapter 11 in 2012. They asked me to partner with them. I said no. And when they went to Chapter 7, as you may know, Chapter 11 still allows a company to operate through bridge loans and so on. When it's in Chapter 7, it closes down. Factories are closed, everybody's terminated. It goes through a major court system. Liabilities are extinguished. Pension plans, unfortunately, are extinguished. So you get effectively a pretty clean company. And so initially, I thought it was the bread was going with it, which makes it much more complicated. And when a company called Flowers Industries bought the breads, the bankers called me and they said, Dean, you only have the sweet goods. Gosh, it was like an angel touching my shoulder. So we bought that, and it was closed down. They had 14 plants before it closed down, some 9,000 employees. So we bought it in the spring of 2013. We opened the doors in July 2013. And 3 plants, we consolidated them down to 3. We spent $200 million in automation. If in fact you go through the plants, they're driven by robotics, which is another subject. Technology is transforming the world. Factory floors are being transformed by robotics. Big data is transforming the matching of probabilities that allow decision making, take it away from subjective analytics. Medicine is being transformed by technology. Well, our factories were transformed by technology. The company struggled to make money. In the first 6 months, the company made $70 million. But the key to it, by the way, I should come back, and it's true for the many companies we've acquired, systems are critical. Management very often makes macro decisions. I should say use macro data to make decisions. And I think decisions have to be driven by IT systems that give you full visibility into every aspect of your business. The profitability of a Twinkie versus a Ho-Ho versus another product versus a glass. You need to know that thousands and millions of SKUs, which are individual products, each of them have profitability issues, challenges. Each of them have to have certain production runs. Customers, you have to anticipate what customers are going to want. We have VMI systems that give us, when the registers ring at the stores, that register updates our records to show how many Twinkies left. So how many do we have to replenish? Because inventories are a major problem. You get obsolescence, you get all kinds of it. So systems drive every decision. They're the basis for decision making. But beyond systems is what Babson's about. There's an entrepreneur that drives. Human capital ultimately drives everything as well. And that human capital has to rely, yes, on information, never do it seat of the pants, but it also relies on a sense of urgency, his own culture, a sense of urgency, a sense of results, being accountable and owning the outcome of what you take on. And that is a magnificent combination that drives success in a business. And that's the culture we try to build in our company with management people that themselves are dynamic. They use some of their instinct because it's based on wonderful experience, but they're driven by a sense of urgency, deliver results, and being accountable for what you're supposed to execute. That culture has made magical differences in the best run companies of the world.
That's fantastic. You know, it's interesting, you talk a lot about the operations side and then about the entrepreneurial side. And many people view that those are at odds with each other. And you have brought them together. Can you talk a little bit about those as separate and then how they might reinforce each other?
Well, the right management cannot divorce them. You know, you sit in a meeting, like, we often sit in meetings, and the managers that want to advocate a position, they want to make an investment in a new plant or a new piece of equipment. And a piece of equipment costs $40 million, and you got to look at the payback. And his recommendations are based on general knowledge of his business sector, but it's also based on analytics, real analytics of how he's going to justify the position he's expressing you to support. And the right manager that comes in shows a passion. When a person comes in and is passionate, it's wonderful because you want to support him or her. And more importantly, then you begin to dig because you're not going to accept that passion as the right way to go. You'll ask very specific questions. And you hope those specific questions are based on some very fundamental factual data. The size of the market, the volume he expects. He may not have his forecast entirely right, but that's okay. He's going to give you, you're going to ask the support for his forecast. The annual sales, the growth of the category, what we've sold over the growth of our own category over 5 years. Where does he expect that? So does his forecast make sense on some factual data? So that individual that wants to come with an idea should be prepared to support that idea with passion, because without one of my biggest frustrations, I want to buy a company in Texas as we speak with Hostess. I was just there. We've been looking at this company for 3 months. It just frustrates the hell out of me, to tell you the truth. We've sent 3 or 4 of our people there, and I don't see one of them owning it. And maybe they're right. So maybe I then have to hold back and say, gee, don't let my own passion be blurred by the facts that these guys are seeing. But when I challenge them, it's very hard for me to understand exactly, because I see a lot of merit in the product line, a fairly efficient manufacturing operation. They have a huge relationship with Starbucks, and they're very nervous. It's too many sales to Starbucks. Well, okay, can't we become better partners and, in fact, broaden our relationship with Starbucks? Yeah, but that's too risky. Well, business is a bit of a risk. You can't take stupid risks and too many of them. Otherwise, on the average, you'll make too many mistakes, and you can't. Most decisions are made to drive the continuity of a business plan that you've been executing for a long time. Yes, on the periphery, you got to take some risks to reach beyond that plan. But don't make the risk profile your big strategy, and you forget about supporting the extension of historic trends.
Perfect. So along the lines of picking up on the data theme, right? If you look at the consumer data in particular, and as we look at your portfolio that you've had, which has included all types of brands, including the Hostess brands. But if you read the paper, it makes it sound like, and you look at some of the news out there, it makes it sound like all we are eating is kale, tofu, and blueberries. Your portfolio is an indication that consumers are not eating only kale, tofu, and blueberries. So what can you tell us about what you've learned about some of the consumer behaviors and trends through your various food portfolio? Well,
that's a phenomenal question, and I'll tell you, it's transitioning more rapidly than any of us anticipate. One of our first early businesses was in the cheese business, and we had acquired all the specialty cheeses in the U.S. because those with a high margin, or the basic cheese business is a terrible business, very commodity, cooperatives pack a lot of milk that's excessive into these basic cheeses, and it just never makes. So we niched into all the blue cheese, all the niche cheeses. And then something called light cheese came up, and it was supposed to transform, and I was nervous. It's my first platform, and I'm saying to myself, gee, light cheese is going to make our products obsolete. And I was very nervous about it. Well, light cheese today is still a very small part of the market, and it hasn't evolved, and it really never threatened our basic business. Today, changes are coming along very differently. First of all, the whole menus, all of a sudden butter is good for you. Now, I still don't like a lot of butter. Salt is good for you. So we have a company called Utz with potato chips and pretzels and so on, and we've acquired a couple things to put together with that. And all of a sudden, that's part of the better for you category, salt. Okay, I never thought that.
I'm excited about that one.
So it is transforming, and online purchasing is affecting it, and sugar is a target in today's point of view of healthier eating. So we're very concerned about sugar. There have been many attempts to change the profile of the product, but one thing any time we make a slight change to our product, that, in fact, we just launched a beautiful line. I encourage you, I wish I had some coupons. About 6 months ago, Warren Buffett was with Bill Gates in Hong Kong, and they're good friends. And they arrived there fairly late, and Bill had a SUV to take him to the hotel, and Warren said, "Gee, we got to eat something. I'm starving." He usually would grab a taxi, but Bill had an SUV. So they went along, and he said to the driver, "Where's the nearest McDonald's?" And so we got quite a few, Mr. Buffett. And so they pulled up to McDonald's. They go in and they buy whatever they bought. And Bill went to reach out to pay, and Warren says, no, hold it. He looks in his pocket. He has these coupons for over 65-year-olds. And he had a cheeseburger. It's great. Anyway, anytime we've made a slight change, and we've launched recently something called Hostess Petites, Petites, como se dice, petites. Yeah. And they're a wonderful upscale product, no artificial flavors. They have very different ingredients to them, and I think you will love them. However, anytime we try to change a slight formula on the traditional product, it is amazing. Our 800 number, consumer number, is inundated with, "You're taking away my Twinkie." And people get very upset when you take their traditional, they enjoy it as an indulgence. So we can never forget that our basic consumer is not going to change overnight. But at the same time, I must tell you, once a month, at most every 2 months, I have these university R&D centers come in and give us a pitch as to what can we do to lower sugar levels, since that is an issue. And perhaps I feel a certain level of responsibility to the consumer too, without affecting the quality. Nestle's coming up with something that they've been working on, and Nestle, by the way, has got a Hostess ice cream, which is that's great. And they're taking sugar, again, technology is everywhere in our lives. They're taking the molecule of sugar, and they take out the core, the center, and the surface is without the center, and you get still a fairly broad level of sweet taste in your mouth, but you don't have the same level of sugar because the density of the sugar is lower. So they're working on it. They're struggling with it a little bit. So we've tried stevia. So I feel a great sense of responsibility to stay very close to where these trends are going to evolve, but I can tell you we're at the same time very committed to satisfying the consumer, and in my true belief, because I eat a lot of these, believe it or not, a lot of them, I love them. But without a smile on my face, my health wouldn't be that great either. Right. So I enjoy eating them, but in moderation.
Fantastic. I want to shift gears to philanthropy. You and your family have been incredibly philanthropic over the years, and you and your wife, Marianne, also signed the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett Giving Pledge, where you have committed to donating the vast majority of your wealth to philanthropic causes. So I'm curious for everyone to hear, what inspired you to make that decision, and was it at all difficult?
It wasn't difficult because you find that money is not a very important part of your life. It complicates it. It's important in that it's a great measure of your efforts and if you're achieving what you are going to achieve. But if I were a doctor and my measure of satisfaction was when my mother was sick and died from breast cancer, I initially, by the way, versus Babson, I was considering medical school because my dad wanted me to be a doctor. But I chose business.
We're glad you came here.
Me too. But when my mother got sick, I would go to doctors, these oncologists, and I looked at them as deities. My God, give me hope. I was reaching out, and I could see what a satisfying profession that this doctor is living to help someone. Even if you know it's, and by the way, huge medical progress is being made around cancers, but nevertheless, I could see that incredible satisfaction you could receive as doing another job other than business or money. And you're a wonderful doctor, you're a wonderful engineer that's designing something special and unique. So money is not a great measure. So giving it away is not the big issue. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of things that we're doing and acquisitions and so forth and so on, and that does need, and I don't even know why we're doing all that because it's fun, I guess, and stimulating. But the decision to give it away, once you've satisfied and fulfilled a certain basic support, level of security for your family and so on, and maybe we all overdo it, I can tell you, because we complicate our children's life with leaving them and taking away that that fulfillment of making it themselves. It's a challenge in itself. So giving it away is not a bad decision. How impactful it can be is the big challenge.
Is the big challenge, absolutely. So let's just talk a little bit about Babson. We talked a little bit this morning. So you were actually here in 1967 and 1969. It was still an all-men's college at the time that Roger Babson founded on teaching business education differently. And he also had the belief that a business career should be rendered in service of humanity, even that long ago. Today, Babson is very, very different, incredibly international. It's led by its first woman president. You're being interviewed by the first woman chair. And the last two classes had 52% women, in addition to incredible international diversity and diversity of all kinds here at Babson.
I think it's a wonderful thing. If I'm proud of Babson about anything more unique than when I was here, it is the fact that women entrepreneurs are being shaped and influenced through these programs. And I've said this to Marla earlier today. Whenever we interact with women, there's even more energy, and maybe because they need to show even more than guys, they strive harder. They are wonderful people to work with. By the way, gentlemen are too, and it's been a wonderful journey for both. But nevertheless, I'm personally very happy to see more and more women, particularly in all levels of society. I look at history. It's full of men with testosterone driving wars, driving crime, all of that. And the more women that are influencing governmental decisions around the world that are more sensitive, logical, sensitive, and all of that, the better balanced and the better the world's going to be. And you know what? And one of my favorite subjects is population growth. Too much population growth in certain parts of the world and its impact on our planet and our environment. Women if they had their choice, women would balance that a lot more effectively than men.
We're going to keep at it. Thank you. So I don't know you very well. I only spent last night and breakfast with you this morning, but I've also interacted with a lot of turnaround executives over my career at McKinsey. And you are not this very typical turnaround. Many of those people are often described as not very nice. Some people would call them jerks along the way. But in just getting to know you, you are humble, curious, compassionate. I'm curious a little bit how you would describe your leadership style and how others might describe you as a leader. When you come into, you've transformed 80 businesses globally. That's a lot of businesses and a lot of leadership.
Well, several things. First of all, I enjoy what I do. I think it's important to be fair, but at the same time very demanding. You drop the culture of a results orientation and demanding results and performance and accountability by those that report to you does not allow for this other. But at the same time, I must tell you, my parents were factory workers here in Boston. My mother died of a chemical because she used to work in a factory that had no sensitivity to chemicals at the time. They probably had no knowledge of those things. And I remember how hard they worked, and the reward was basic living and supporting their families. So one of my acquisitions, actually, many years ago was up in Maine. It was a company called Kirshner. They used to make the Fenway Frank and a wonderful hot dog company. And we looked at a business here in Massachusetts called Essam up in Lawrence, Mass. And I remember walking through there to buy it because this English company that owned Kirshner had built this beautiful facility. And we needed to fill it with a lot more capacity. So I'm going up to Lawrence, Mass, and I walk through the plant, and this lady comes up to me. And I thought she was like 60 years old. I understood she was 46, very tired. And she says, "Mister," she says, I hear you want to buy this company. And I said, well, we're looking at the possibility. I know what you want to do. You want to buy it to close this down. I have 3 kids and I'm a single mother. And she says, "You're disgusting." And she walked away. It really made me feel very emotional. In fact, I remember going to church and I was saying, am I doing the right? In fact, we bought it and closed it. That was the destiny of that operation. It couldn't have survived in any event. but it affected me very much. And but I don't know how to do it differently. As I said, I'm proud to say that we bought Twinkies. It employed almost 9,000 people. A year before it closed its doors, and we opened it up with 1,100 people and automation and so forth and so on. Did I do anybody a favor? We laid off. We didn't lay them off. They were laid off before it went to bankruptcy. All these people. On the other hand, that's where the world is going. The world is going to automation. Automation and technology are also major contributors to a sense of isolation by a lot of people. We have to retrain. We have to re-educate. We have to create more vocational opportunities. And, I can't impact a lot of all those things. And my focus is, if something is to survive, if something's going to compete in a highly tense environment of competition, you got to do it better and more efficiently. And often that means less labor content. Less labor content should mean that we buy other entities, we're able to stimulate additional growth. But it's a very interesting challenge. So in my life, I've grown up very humble and enjoying humanity very much. In fact, Lori has my, one of the dearest pictures I have was when we bought Hostess from two of our plants, the laborers, because the first thing I did when I went in, I could see them standing on their feet all day, and I wanted to change how they worked. Not that it was very important. Bring them different types of shoes to wear if they're going to stand up. Maybe put a little chair where they can lean on it once in a while through an 8, 9, 10-hour day. And bring in more cool in the plant. Columbus, Georgia was one of our plants. It used to be, I was there for, I worked a night shift and a day shift just to see what was going on when we first bought the company. And I said to myself, it must be 112 in here, and poor people and just bring some fans, something to help. So anyway, they sent me this beautiful large, part of our success I shared with them through special bonuses. And if I enjoyed anything about the turnaround, yes, the Twinkie is delicious, but it was also that I'm touched by human beings. And by the way, I've traveled Africa and Asia, and it just, luckily, God's blessed me with an upbeat personality, because you see things around the world, it is very depressing. It's to see children suffering, humanity, and that's what's driven my commitment to even in this country. I mean, you look at pockets like in Chicago, LA, how do they ever break out of these environments where it just overwhelms me and saddens my life, and I try to participate, but I feel guilty that I don't give it the same juice that I give turning around Hostess or Utz or what other businesses we buy. We make an impact on that. With these charity things, either I should give myself 100% to try to make an impact, which I'm not, I struggle with how to do it, and or you just try to support it, and other people take a lot of lead, and credits to people like Bill and Melinda Gates and Mike Milken and many others who devote a big part of their life to putting structures in place to be impactful with the philanthropy and research and illnesses and so on.
Right. So what we heard last night, we're hearing a little bit about some of the other passions that you have. You have a passion for history. I understand you played polo in Brazil for a while.
No, here in Stowe, Vermont,
Here?
I had polo ponies in Vermont, but I played in Buenos Aires.
Ski and all kinds of other interests. And just talk a little bit about that curiosity and how that interacts with the business that you do. And oftentimes people keep those things very, very separate. These are my outside of work activities. These are my work activities. Or I do social over here and I do work over here. But it all comes together in your passions.
Yes. Well, I don't know. Again, it's a gift. My parents gave me love and confidence, and God endowed me with a level of curiosity that somehow drove my personality to fulfill it. I mean, I was almost a helpless.
That's hard to imagine, but we'll take your word for it.
I just, when I was young, my first 10, 11 years, as I said last night, I used to work for an international company. I was luckily very successful there and took some very great promotions. I lived in Paris, Geneva, Brussels. I spent several months in Hong Kong. And I would travel 30 days a month in almost every continent. Probably every 2 months I'd be in a different continent and just constantly traveled. And when I would travel for business, I would go to Burma because I heard something fun about it, or I met a girlfriend that said, geez, let's go there. So we would go. I'd be in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but one of the pretty ladies there was saying, gee, let's go to Ipanema. Oh, okay, let's go to Ipanema. So I would constantly explore everything. But I had a passion to read about cultures. Africa I found it incredibly interesting. I found the Middle East very interesting. India, we had a great partnership in India with Rajiv Gandhi, who the family and his mother. He opened my eyes off to totally different cultures. There are 96 different languages in China. Just incredible when you travel around, the differences. And I don't know, equally to my passion for work, which was tenacious and hard charging, was the curiosity about cultures. And I'd love to understand how the Zulu tribe challenged the Brits with their cannons and all. And how the Dutch finally, in the Treaty of Berlin in 1888, that sort of arbitrarily divided up Africa just for minerals and so on, and left very little behind when they all pulled out. And you got to stop me because I can get passionate about
that's
all
okay.
this stuff.
I want the group to hear about where you see the future going and some of the most important areas that they should think about going forward. We talked a little bit about this at breakfast, and then I want to close with your advice to them as entrepreneurial leaders, and then we'll see if there's any questions from the audience.
Good. Well, the world's going a lot of different places, and some of it I don't really understand. It's discouraging, all this ISIS and all of that. But from a business and economic and social perspective, two major tides are driving the world today. And I spoke at a European conference this past year. Technology is one of those. It is touching every part of our lives, and it's going to expand. It still relies on human capital, but as I said, it affects factory floors. It affects big data that drives decisions, genomics and medicine and genetic sequencing, the chromosomal studies of cells and matching those probabilities up with the closest individuals like you around the world, and what has affected them will give us more predictability of what you can expect with your particular set of chromosomal structures. It is phenomenal what's going on in every part of our lives, but we need to help people keep up with that technology. So that's a very important, major influence in our lives. The other very important influence is financial engineering. When I was starting, J.P. Morgan was my favorite banker, State Street Bank in Boston, Bankers Trust, my early partners. Those were conventional banks. Today, conventional banks play a much smaller role, an important role, by the way, very important role. But the other part of it that almost enables every opportunity in the world, whether it's an early startup in Tanzania or a growing business somewhere in Southeast Asia, it's venture capital, hedge funds, and private equity. They're transforming the landscape of our business world, and they're providing all kinds of types of capital that enables almost every idea to grow. And then you have the traditional large companies which are being attacked by a lot of activists because they get, over a lot of years, the status quo begins to become normal for them, and they need to challenge that status quo. They're invariably far too bureaucratic, far too heavy, not agile enough. So this whole thing of financial engineering, venture capital, activists, hedge funds, private equity, I've loved it myself. It stimulates me. It gives you full control to transform, whereas banking doesn't, whereas corporate America doesn't. That's why activists get involved. That's why people like 3G and Warren Buffett, and we're working with Warren on something now, to buy these huge, the Crafts, the Unilevers, that they've tried to do that with Mondelez, and transform them. How do they transform them? By gutting the existing culture and sprinkling it and seeding it with the types of things we're talking about, accountability, agility, sense of urgency, those type of things.
Awesome. What's your advice to the entrepreneurial leaders in the audience here this morning?
Well, if you're all entrepreneurs, all the things we've been talking about, feel passionate about what you want, be analytical, because if you see to the pants, I got to tell you, it's too competitive a world out there to just to be seat of the pants. So you have to have the base information that drives your decisions, supports your decisions, but drive them with tenacity. Feel like you own it, because so many managers advocate great subjects, and if they can sell it, great, but they don't own its execution. So feel like you can own it. Be focused on results. As I said last night, leave the word explanations outside the door and go in with results. I'm here about results. Even if they're poor results, you have a plan to turn it around, or you walk away not to invest much more time or effort. But it's performance, it's a sense of urgency, it's agility, it's creativity, supported by good factual data.
So a lot of business fundamentals, actually.
Yeah.
The things that are core to focus on. That's fantastic. Were there any audience questions? I think were they coming up on the app, or are we doing them via? Here we go. Perfect. All right. So the people have voted on an app.
Okay.
Speaking of technology,
Okay.
right here at our session, and they've submitted their questions and voted on them. So the first one that has come up of which of your companies has taught you the most and why?
Well, I'm not sure I can point. I probably learned the most in my first 10, 11 years with this large, very bureaucratic company. The parent company was bureaucratic, but the international business was very entrepreneurial. But it was a big public company, so it taught me the disciplines of having to hit quarterly earnings, having to have audited financial statements and behaviors that do not cause significant dislocations, of having reporting problems, accountability, and all of that. So I learned that. But it also commingled with my own personality to be highly aggressive, entrepreneurial, and go take. So I learned those basics, I think, skills. And in the process, you continue to grow, throughout the process of everything you do and every business we buy, everyone different. If we bought a company or owned a company in Europe, labor situations are more complicated. You can't lay off people very easily. It'll cost you a lot more, so you have to take that into account as you manage that business. So you learn different things in different environments. A sweet goods business is going to be different than those beautiful chateaus in Reims, France, with the Mum Champagne Perrier. I should have drunk more. That's one thing I didn't learn. I should have drunk more of that Perrier Jouet champagne in France. And they used to have these magnificent bottles of wine. The Mum cellars, they would age champagne, but during World War II, the Nazis and the SS would steal all the beautiful art, and Coco Chanel, as you may have read, anyway, was. But they used to steal a lot of champagnes. And these families that own these beautiful businesses that go back 300-400 years would put these walls, and they'd make them look dirty and old, so it didn't look like it was a new. And they would hide these beautiful wines and champagnes in the back. And anyway, it was just so much fun.
But you can make up with it on the Twinkie side.
Yes, that's what we're doing.
From that standpoint.
I'm eating a lot of these.
So another question is, what did Babson teach you that you still carry with you today?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I love the interaction here. I love a level of discipline in my statistics and my finance classes. And yet, the entrepreneurial side was not the structure that I think some schools can feel very good about, providing a very structured learning process. But for me, at least, the disciplines of the more disciplined subjects like finance and statistics and so on, and even accounting, they supported, but they allowed my spirit to be more creative on the other side. And I think that combination was a very important part for me.
Fantastic. Great to hear. Let's see. You mentioned money is not a great pleasure, but when you started out, what motivated you? What drove your passion when you first started your career?
Fulfillment of accomplishment.
Accomplishment and results seems to be a very key theme throughout the interviews. Can you guys scroll down a little bit more for the questions? Not sure who's. What would you consider as the most important lesson you've learned in your life, or lessons?
There's so many. We learn lessons around family. We learn lessons around business. the most important lesson probably is to feel passion of what you do, because life's too short to be caught in a rut for a very long time. And professionally, certainly, because professional part of our life is a very important part of our life. And, if you're not happy at one part of your life, it influences other parts of your life. So I think it's important to try to work hard to find that niche that matches your personality, that allows you to express your personality, because once you express it, you're going to be pretty good at it. Amazing to me, I'm probably no more capable than everybody in this room, and some are even more capable, but I was lucky to find that niche opportunity that allowed me to express and enthuse and kindle my passions. And that's what made me successful. So I hope and I wish that for every young person growing up. And then we learn lessons. Our family situations are always very complicated. Interacting with relatives and friends and raising children in the right way. You never learn enough about that, because every personality is different, every situation causes changes. So you try to do as best you do. So you try to live, I think, a good life, a meaningful life that is socially responsible, that's aware of other people who are struggling far more than you. And you try very hard to find that niche that allows the blossoming of your own personality and achievement.
I think that's a fantastic way for us to close. I think we are at about time anyway. Perfect.
Good.
Thank
Great.
you so much, Dean.
Thank you.
Thank you.